all the children are welcome to come down here to the front. Anybody who wants to come down and sit in the front row, I like to interact with the kids. So I ask a lot of questions. If they'd like to come down and participate, that'd be great. Give you guys a second if you want to come down. Come on over, guys. Right here, huh? You guys sit right here? There we go. Anybody else want to come up? Have a seat right here, hon. Have a seat right here. No, honey. Have a seat right here. All right, you good? Awesome. There we go. Awesome, guys. All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Carrie, and this is Dino Encounters. And today I'm going to take you on a tour 65 billion years ago to learn about some dinosaurs that inhabited what is today North America. Now, to give you guys some context, behind me here on this backdrop represents about 550 million years of life on the planet. Our planet's about 4.5 billion years old. And up until right over here, we had 400 billion years. Nothing very interesting happened. And then from here forward, we start to have the beginnings of life. We are way over here, at the tail end of the last ice age. And what a lot of people don't realize is that we've had 6 mass extinctions on this planet over 4.5 or 550 billion years, or 500 billion years. And all of those were related to climate change, except the last one, which was right here, when an asteroid struck the Earth. So our planet actually wobbles on its axis, plus or minus about 25 degrees. And when it's most vertical, we have the least amount of sunlight striking it, which allows the polar ice caps to increase. And at one point in time, our entire planet was covered with ice. And at another point in time, at its farthest point on its axis, in the Jurassic, there was no ice on the planet. So we had just a natural ebb and flow of what happens to our planet over time. But today we're going to focus on this period right here called the Cretaceous period. Now the dinosaurs started over here about 300 million years ago, but they were really small. And then they got a little bit bigger, and then they reached their peak in the Cretaceous. Now the movies are called Jurassic Park and Jurassic World, but the real peak of the dinosaurs was during the Cretaceous. And that was also known as the age of the flowering plants. That's when we started to have a lot of insects pollinating things. And we had a lot of things smelling good, which probably was helpful since probably the dinosaurs were pretty stinky. And it was very hot during the Cretaceous, a whole lot hotter than it is today. There was an average of about 25 degrees on average warmer globally. Our average global temperature today is about 55 degrees, and it was about 25 to 30 degrees hotter during the Cretaceous. So you're thinking, okay, 75 degrees, that's not bad. But if all of the continents were in the form of Pangea, right around the equator of this planet, that meant that the average daily temperature was probably about 110 degrees. That's pretty warm for these dinosaurs. Now that also attributed to a lot, it's like a hothouse, where a lot of plants were just growing like crazy. All that CO2 in the atmosphere, those plants were sucking that up. It was warm and moist, very dense vegetation, which allowed our herbivores to get great big, okay? So that's an overview of the environment and the historical context of what we're going to talk about today. Now, anybody here a paleontologist or want to be a paleontologist? Any of you guys want to be a paleontologist? No? What? T-Rex is the best. I like your hat. Well, who can at least give me a definition of a paleontologist? What do? They don't make much money. What do? They do what? What do you think? a dust-off dinosaur bone? Well, kind of, sort of. A paleontologist is a special kind of scientist that studies this life that's already extinct. And that could be plant life, that could be mammals, that could be reptiles, and that could be dinosaurs. And by the way, dinosaurs are their own unique thing. For example, this right up here, what is this, guys? It's fly. It's a pterodactyl. Actually, it's a pteranodon in the pterodactyl family. Pteranodons are unique to North America because they did not have any teeth. And they lived in Kansas because 65 million years ago there was a great inland sea up through the middle of the United States, and there were high cliffs all the way around the sea, and the pteranodons would swoop down like a seagull and eat fish out of that sea. The Mosasaurus also lived in that inland sea, all right? But the pteranodon is actually a flying reptile. It is not a dinosaur, okay? Now this guy up here, he lived about 12 million years before the first dinosaur, and he's more mammal-like than he is reptile or dinosaur. Okay, so there are some distinctions here between these three things. What's interesting though about the dinosaurs, this is Scout, everybody. This is Scout. Now, who can tell me what kind of dinosaur is Scout? What do you think? A what?
Not the head moving.
What do you think? Triceratops. And how did you form that idea of Triceratops? He has 3 horns on his face, doesn't he? 3 little bitty horns. Now they could have just called him 3-horned face, right? Why wouldn't they just do that? That would have been simple. Well, as it turns out, paleontologists, when they discover something, they name it after a feature. And because they like to be smarter than the rest of us, they have to make it difficult to pronounce and difficult to spell. So they translate that feature into another language, in this case the Greek language, and that's how we get Triceratops. That literally translates 3-horned face. So all of the dinosaurs we talk about today actually are named after a feature that's been translated into the Greek, okay? All right, so this guy, when he grows up, well, let me ask you, what does he like to eat? What do you think? And what do we call dinosaurs that like to eat plants? Herbivores? Does that sound familiar? So he's a herbivore. Now remember, the grass back then was a lot more nutritious than today, a lot more calories. Scientists aren't sure if they just kept growing their whole lives or if they reached a point of maturity. Like humans, like mammals, we grow to a certain point and then we stop and we just get wider. We don't grow any taller, right? This guy, however, he's going to get the size of my trailer. If you look behind me, from about here to the end is 20 feet. And from the ground to the top of my trailer is 11 and a half feet. This guy at maturity will be about 20 feet long and about 12 feet tall. And he's going to weigh about 22,000 pounds. Now I weighed my trailer when it was fully loaded before I took off on the road because I wanted to see what kind of pathetic gas mileage I would get. It weighed in at 23,640 pounds. So basically that trailer is the size of this Triceratops. That's huge, right? And he got that big by eating grass. That's insane, right? That's a lot of calories. That's a different kind of metabolism we're just not familiar with, okay? Now, as he matures, these horns will get to be about 5.5 feet long. And does anybody know what this part of his little head's called? You say frill? No? I thought you said frill. It's a bony frill. And what does he use that for? Any ideas? What do you think? It is for protection. Actually, it makes him look really handsome, right? But it also protects his neck. If a predator approached him, all he would do is lean his head back, tip his head back, and that bony frill would cover his neck like a shield, and then it would angle those nice long horns up. What do you think would happen to an animal that charges in on him? Would he get poked? He'd get poked, wouldn't he? They have actually found the fossilized remains of a T-Rex they believe died from an infection and received after getting wounded by a Triceratops. There were spore tracks along its bones where the horns came in. So even though the movies and TV like to portray a T-Rex as invincible, the reality is they were very vulnerable to getting injured and getting infected. There were no vets back then with antibiotics. So if he got wounded, he was probably going to die. So unlike what we think of the T-Rex, he was more of a scavenger than a hunter, okay? And that's an important distinction, because I'm going to introduce you with our next dinosaur to a real hunter. All right, let's put this guy up. We'll be right back with our next dinosaur, which is our first carnivore. Hold on. His name is Razor.
Z, you got another
There we
snack?
go.
You got another snack?
Now, this is Razor. He's about 4 months old. What kind of dinosaur is Razor? A raptor? Okay. Who agrees that he's a raptor? A lot of people think he's a velociraptor because of the movie, but he's not. A velociraptor is short, has feathers, and looks like a turkey. He's really ugly. This is a cousin of the raptor called a Deinonychus. And like the other raptors of the family, they have this really sharp claw back here. Okay? And in this case, he's named Terrible Claw, which translates into the Greek Deinonychus. Okay? Now, the first Deinonychus that was found in the 1960s was actually at a hadrosaur site. He was underneath a fossilized hadrosaur. And the scientists were very, very surprised because up until that point in time, they had imagined all the dinosaurs to be these great big, heavy, Triceratops-looking things. Well, when you look at this guy, obviously you can see he's athletic, a lot more agile, probably a fast runner and a great jumper. Okay, so they wanted to understand why then was there a fossilized Deinonychus underneath this hadrosaur, and I believe they found bits and pieces of other ones in the same area. So something happened between that hadrosaur and these Deinonychuses, and they suspicioned that the Deinonychuses had actually killed the hadrosaur. So what do you think? How would they figure this out? They wanted to understand how it would have hunted with these claws. Because as they examined the skull of this little guy, they realized he did not have strong jaws. Unlike a T-Rex, they could grab a hold of something with its jaws and shake its head and just tear it apart. The Deinonychus, his jaws would break. So he had to use something else as his primary weapon, and they believed it were these talons. So in order to understand how they hunted, they looked for an animal today that was similar. What animal do you think they chose to study? Any guesses? What do you think? An eagle? High five. You're hired. A bald eagle. They chose to study a bald eagle, and the reason is because the hind foot of the bald eagle and that of the Deinonychus are about the same size and shape. They each have 3 bones. Very little difference between them. So they studied the bald eagle, and they were able to see that a bald eagle could take down animals much larger than itself, such as a caribou. Did you guys know an eagle could kill a caribou? That's like bigger than a reindeer. That's like bigger than an elk. Weighs about 1,500, 2,000 pounds. And the way they do it is they land on the back of that caribou, they grab a hold with their claws, and they rip, just like this. And that poor caribou is trying to shake it off and runs around trying to get the eagle off his back, and he can't get him loose. Pretty soon he starts to get tired. He starts losing a lot of blood. Pretty soon he falls down and dies, and that eagle can eat him. And that's how they believe the Deinonychus is also hunted. If I were to travel back to the Cretaceous, I would not be worried about a T-Rex. I would be worried about a pack of these things because they were fast, they were quick, they had a keen sense of smell, they had really great eyesight, and really great hearing. They were apex predators. We think of the T-Rex as an apex predator, but scientists are now believing that it was more of a scavenger than it was an actual hunter. Okay? So this guy, he's going to grow up to be about 13 feet long. He'll stand about 6 feet, 5.5, 6 feet at the back, and he'll weigh about 750 pounds. So considerably larger. And to the best of our knowledge, he does not have feathers. Now it's interesting because paleontologists, they will find one thing and then they'll start generalizing that to everything. So for example, they found some skin fragments from a velociraptor that looked like chicken skin, like it had had feathers. So then they started to imagine that all the dinosaurs had feathers. Unfortunately, they've now started to back off of that idea because they're just not seeing evidence of it in the fossil record. They found a lot of skin from the hadrosaurs that does not indicate any kind of feather. All right, that's the problem with fossils, is they just don't tell us very much about the animal when it's younger or when it's older, just at the point of time when it dies. So I'm going to put Razor up, and we're going to come out with our next dinosaur. So hold real tight. I want to see if any of you guys can identify it. All right? Be right back. Here we go. What kind of dinosaur is this?
I like him.
What is this?
Oh, wow.
Ankylosaurus. Now, if it gets its name from a feature, what feature do you think that is? The spikes? Well, these are not spikes. These are actually called scutes or osteoderms. We see the same type of bony plate under the skin in today's modern day armadillo and crocodile and alligator. Okay? So unlike a turtle whose shell is on the outside of its skin, these animals had bony plates that fused together under the skin, forming as it matures a shell just underneath its skin. Now, that's kind of problematic if you think about it, because unlike the turtle, he cannot pull his head back if something comes after him, right? Because his shell is underneath the skin. Also, it does not cover his cover, so he's very vulnerable. If he gets flipped over, he's kind of stuck.
You got lipstick all the way down your chin. And now you got a crumb.
When he grows up, will be about 20 feet long as well, but will only stand about 5.5 feet tall. He's a really heavy guy, slow moving, and the shell gets in the way of his head movement. So he spends his whole life kind of looking down. He can't really look up at the sky. So whatever he liked to eat must have been the ground. Now, a couple of interesting things about him. How do you think he protects himself? He's not going to run away. What do you think? What's that? No, he can't curl up in a ball. What do you think? He's going to whack him with the tail. Now, I don't know how effective that would be. This club, by the way, gets up to about 50 pounds, be about the size of a beach ball, not like that around. And if something comes at him, and he's only 5.5 feet tall, and he swings it, I guess if it's tall, he's going to whack it in the knees. But shorter predators, he'd be whacking him in the head. But I don't know about a T-Rex. You'd have to hit him probably around the knees, okay? So I don't know how effective it is, but that's his one major defense. Now here's an interesting story about this dinosaur. All these animals we're talking about today were uniquely adapted to this very hot environment of the Cretaceous. And this guy, his nose is soft like a bird's beak, or it's hard instead of being soft. And his nostrils are on the side. So why do you think his nose is like a bird's beak? It serves a special purpose. What do you think? Well, scientists believe that because he had to look for whatever he ate on the ground, they think he used that bird beak of his to dig in the ground for something to eat. You guys like potatoes?
She hot.
Well, potatoes are a root. They're found in the ground, and maybe he likes to eat potatoes. We're not really sure, but they think he dug with his nose. And if his nostrils had been plugged, what would have happened to his nostrils? They could have gotten plugged up, right? So we think that's why his nostrils are on the side. So here's the most interesting detail about him of all. You see, about 7 years ago, they were excavating a parking lot up in Canada. And as they were digging with the backhoe, they dug down and they hit something really hard. They found an entirely preserved ankylosaur. Notice the tail the whole body was in. They even saw some color in its skin. Now, they think it's stuck down in mud, and that's why it was preserved so well. But when they pulled him up, they wanted to x-ray to see if they could see anything inside. The x-ray would penetrate its back, but when they looked inside its head, what do you think they saw? One would hope a brain, but there was no brain. But instead, they found tubes, like a marble run of tubes, like a sippy straw of tubes. And the scientists were very perplexed. If you were a paleontologist, how would you start to solve that problem? How would you try to understand why a dinosaur would have a maze of tubes in its head? Well, they created a hypothesis that goes something like this. On a warm day in the Cretaceous, he's using a lot of energy to find food. He's building up a lot of internal heat. And unlike you and I, dinosaurs could not sweat. So what is he going to do to keep from having his brain overheat? Well, they believe that he would inhale the cooler outside air through those nostrils. That would circulate around his brain in those tubes, drawing away the heat, and then he would exhale out the warmer air. That process of respiration, they believe, is what kept this dinosaur